Dr. Arthur Evans, a man whose silver hair and gentle hands told tales of countless lives saved and lost, adjusted his spectacles. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his meticulously organized yet undeniably quiet veterinary clinic. Years of dedication had etched lines of wisdom and a subtle, lingering sadness around his eyes. He meticulously cleaned a set of surgical tools, the metallic clink the only sound breaking the silence, a familiar rhythm to a life that had become too predictable, too solitary. Earlier, Mrs. Albright had brought in her prize-winning Persian Bartholomew for his bi-weekly grooming and vitamin shot, fussing over a non-existent mat in his fur, her voice a stark, cheerful contrast to the quiet hum of Arthur's existence. He had nodded, prescribed, and smiled faintly, the interaction feeling as routine and hollow as the last. His competence was unquestioned, his reputation sterling, yet a void remained, a space once filled with a warmth he now only dimly recalled. He often wondered if the animals sensed it, this quiet ache he carried. They, with their unerring instincts, often offered more comfort than any human conversation could. What's the one thing your pet does that always makes you feel less alone? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Arthur sighed, placing the last tool in its rightful place, the silence of the clinic pressing in once more, a familiar companion to his solitude. He glanced at the clock, the slow tick echoing the steady, uneventful pace of his days. The heavy oak door of Evans' Veterinary Care clicked shut, the sound echoing briefly before being absorbed by the evening quiet of the street. Dr. Arthur Evans locked it methodically, a nightly ritual performed with the same precision he applied to surgery. He paused for a moment, the worn leather of his briefcase familiar in his grip, and looked up at the darkening sky. Streetlights flickered on, casting a lonely glow. His walk home was short, past houses where dinner preparations were underway, the murmur of conversations and the occasional burst of laughter drifting through open windows. Sounds from a world that felt distant to him. His own house greeted him with silence. It was a comfortable home, well kept, but it held the stillness of a place lived in by one person for too long. He hung his coat, the rustle of fabric loud in the hallway. In the kitchen he prepared a simple meal, the clinking of cutlery on a single plate the only accompaniment. He ate standing by the counter, looking out at his small, neat garden now cloaked in shadows. There were no shared stories of the day, no easy banter, just the quiet chewing and the hum of the refrigerator. Later, settled in his worn armchair in the living room, a book lay open but unread on his lap. His gaze drifted to the mantelpiece where a few framed photographs stood. One in particular, a faded image of a woman with a kind smile and a small, scruffy terrier at her feet, held his attention for a long moment. A familiar pang, dulled by time but never entirely gone, tightened his chest. He sighed, a soft, almost inaudible sound, and picked up his book again, though his thoughts remained elsewhere. The only true, uncomplicated warmth in his life these days seemed to come from the soft purr of a recovering patient, or the grateful lick of a dog's tongue. It was a comfort, yes, but a solitary one. The silence of the house was a constant reminder of what was missing, a quiet ache that had become his most steadfast companion. The next morning, as Dr. Evans was methodically preparing for the day's appointments, the bell above the clinic door chimed unexpectedly. It wasn't a scheduled patient. He looked up from his notes to see a small girl, no older than 8 or 9, standing hesitantly in the doorway. Her clothes were clean but threadbare, her shoes scuffed and worn. In her arms she clutched a bundle wrapped in a faded, thin blanket. Her eyes, large and wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, were fixed on him. "Please, mister." Her voice was a small, trembling whisper. "Please, you have to help him." She took a tentative step forward, her knuckles white as she held the bundle. "Tighter. He's not moving much anymore." Dr. Evans softened his expression, a familiar ache stirring in his chest at the sight of her raw distress. He had seen this kind of desperation many times over the years, the pure, unadulterated love of a child for their pet, often their only constant companion in a harsh world. "Come in, child, let's have a look," he said gently, gesturing towards the examination table. She approached cautiously, her gaze never leaving the bundle. With trembling fingers, she carefully unwrapped the blanket. Inside lay a small ginger cat, so still and frail it barely looked alive. Its fur was matted, its breathing shallow and ragged. One eye was crusted shut, and a thin trickle of blood stained the fur near its mouth. It was a heartbreaking sight, a tiny creature on the very brink. The little girl stroked its head with a feather-light touch, tears welling in her eyes. "His name is Rusty," she choked out. "He's my best friend. I don't have any money, sir, but please, you have to save him. He's all I've got." Her plea hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a child's profound love and utter helplessness. Dr. Evans looked from the nearly lifeless cat to the tear-streaked face of the little girl, a familiar conflict beginning to brew within him. The pragmatic veterinarian versus the man whose heart, despite its calluses, could still be touched by such innocent devotion. Dr. Evans gently lifted Rusty onto the cool metal of the examination table. The little cat was alarmingly light, its body limp. He began his examination with practiced efficiency, his touch surprisingly delicate for his large hands. He checked Rusty's temperature, dangerously low. His gums were pale, almost white, a clear sign of severe anemia or shock. Listening with his stethoscope, he heard the faint, thready heartbeat and the shallow, crackling sounds in the lungs that indicated pneumonia. The small wound near Rusty's mouth was infected, and there were signs of dehydration. The little girl, whose name he learned was Lily, watched his every move, her small face a mask of anxiety, her hands clasped tightly together. "He was fine yesterday morning, mostly," Lily whispered, her voice hoarse. "He was playing with a piece of string, then he just got sleepy. And he wouldn't eat." She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I gave him some water with a spoon, but he didn't want it." Dr. Evans continued his assessment. The symptoms were severe, pointing to a rapid decline. It could be a common feline illness, like a severe upper respiratory infection, but the speed and intensity were worrying. He palpated Rusty's abdomen gently. The cat didn't even flinch, a bad sign. As he carefully felt along the cat's side, his fingers brushed against something small and hard, tucked beneath, the matted fur near Rusty's ribs. It was almost hidden. He parted the fur. It wasn't a tumor or a typical injury. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible puncture wound, already showing signs of a nasty infection spreading beneath the skin. It looked like a bite, but not from another cat or a dog. It was too small, too precise. He frowned, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Lily, did Rusty get into a fight with another animal? Or did anything unusual happen to him?" Lily shook her head, her brow furrowed in confusion. "No, sir. He mostly stays in our little yard. There's an old shed there. He likes to sleep under it sometimes." Dr. Evans' mind raced. The symptoms: rapid onset, fever, lethargy, respiratory distress, the peculiar puncture wound, began to coalesce into a troubling, almost unbelievable pattern. It was a long shot, something he hadn't encountered in years, something most vets might only read about. A cold dread started to creep in. He looked at the small, almost lifeless form of Rusty, then at Lily's hopeful, tear-filled eyes. The diagnosis forming in his mind was not just dire, it was almost impossible to treat, especially in a creature so frail and without significant resources. He needed to be sure, but the initial signs were terrifyingly clear. The prognosis, if he was right, was grim, practically a death sentence. How could he tell this child? Dr. Evans took a deep breath, the clinical detachment he usually relied upon faltering. He needed to confirm his suspicion, but the implications were heavy. "Lily," he began, his voice softer than usual, "Rusty is very, very sick. That little mark on his side, and I'm worried it might be a snake bite, a very dangerous kind." Lily's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. "A snake? But we don't see snakes there. They can be good at hiding, especially in old sheds or wood piles," Dr. Evans explained gently. "And some have venom that works very quickly, making a little cat like Rusty incredibly ill. It attacks their breathing, their blood, everything." He omitted the near certainty of the specific type of highly neurotoxic venom he suspected, one for which antivenom was rare, expensive, and often administered too late. The odds were astronomically against Rusty. Standard procedure, especially with no funds for intensive, highly specialized care, would be to recommend euthanasia to end the suffering. He looked at Lily, at the raw hope still flickering in her eyes despite his grave words. He saw not just a child and her pet, but a profound bond, a lifeline. He thought of his own past, of losses he couldn't prevent, of moments where he wished he could have done more. This felt different. This small, determined girl with nothing but love for her dying friend stirred something in him, something he thought had long since faded. The pragmatic voice in his head screamed about the futility, the cost, the almost certain failure. But another voice, quieter yet insistent, spoke of compassion, of trying, of not letting this tiny spark of hope be extinguished without a fight. He looked directly into Lily's eyes. "Lily, this is going to be very, very difficult. Rusty he's in a bad way. The treatment for this, if I'm right, is complicated, and there are no guarantees. Not many at all." He paused, the weight of his next words immense. "But I see how much he means to you." He made a decision then, one that defied logic, defied the odds, defied the quiet despair that had become his companion. "I will do everything in my power to save him, everything. I can't promise a miracle, Lily, but I promise you, I will try my very best. We will fight for him together." A single tear escaped Lily's eye and traced a path down her dusty cheek, but this time it was followed by a fragile, watery smile. "Really? You'll really try?" "I really will, Dr. Evans affirmed, a new unfamiliar resolve hardening his gaze. He didn't know how, he didn't know if it was even possible, but he had made a promise. And as he looked at the tiny, still form of Rusty, he knew he had to try to keep it, against all odds. If you believe that a small act of compassion can change the world, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future stories. Dr. Evans sprang into action, the years of experience overriding the emotional turmoil. "All right, Lily, I need you to be very brave and sit quietly over there," he said, his voice now firm but still kind, gesturing to a chair in the corner. "I need to work fast." He gently placed an oxygen mask over Rusty's tiny muzzle, the hiss of the gas a stark sound in the quiet room. He then expertly inserted a tiny intravenous catheter into Rusty's fragile leg, a feat of precision given the cat's size and condition. Fluids began to drip, a lifeline against the dehydration and shock. He administered a broad-spectrum antibiotic for the infection, and a pain reliever. Each step was meticulous, focused. Lily sat ramrod straight, her eyes wide, watching every move. As he worked, gently cleaning the matted fur around Rusty's neck to better assess his breathing and overall condition, his fingers encountered something thin and stiff beneath the grime and tangles. He carefully parted the fur. It was a collar, so old and faded it was almost the same color as Rusty's ginger fur. It was made of a cheap synthetic material, cracked and frayed at the edges, clearly having been worn for a very long time. Most stray or neglected cats didn't wear collars, or if they did, they were usually lost quickly. Curiosity piqued, Dr. Evans examined it more closely. Attached to the collar, almost hidden by a fold, was a tiny, tarnished metal charm. It was crudely shaped, like a child might have made it, a lopsided star. He rubbed the grime off it with his thumb. As the dull metal gleamed faintly under the clinic lights, a jolt, sharp and unexpected, went through him. His breath caught in his throat. That star, he knew that star. His hand trembled slightly as he held it. A wave of memory, so vivid it was almost disorienting, washed over him. He saw a much younger version of himself, laughing, kneeling in a sun-dappled garden. He saw a woman's smiling face, her hands guiding a smaller pair of hands, a child's hands, as they clumsily pressed a star shape into a piece of soft clay, which was later cast into this very charm. He remembered the small, scruffy terrier puppy, yapping at their feet, the recipient of that first handmade collar. The puppy's name, it had been Lucky, and the woman as his wife Eleanor, gone so many years now. The child, their daughter Sarah, lost to him even longer, in a different, more complicated way. The room seemed to tilt. This couldn't be. It was impossible. Yet, there it was, a tiny, tarnished star on a dying cat, a relic from a life he thought was buried deep in the past. The fight to save Rusty suddenly became intensely personal, a desperate grasp at a thread, connecting him to a time of love and unbearable loss. Shaken but resolute, Dr. Evans pushed the flood of memories aside, focusing with renewed intensity on the tiny patient before him. The star charm was a mystery for later. Right now, Rusty's life hung by the thinnest of threads. "The venom from these snakes," he explained to Lily, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's like a fast-acting poison that tries to shut down the body's control systems. We need to support Rusty's breathing and circulation, and fight the toxin." He knew the specific anti-venom required was incredibly rare and prohibitively expensive. His small clinic didn't stock it. Few did. Calling other local vets yielded no success. The nearest possible source was a large, specialized animal hospital in the city, hours away. Time Rusty didn't have. Despair gnawed at him, but he refused to yield. He remembered a lecture from years ago, a controversial last resort protocol for certain neurotoxic envenomations when antivenom was unavailable, focusing on aggressive supportive care and attempting to manage the symptoms until the body could, hopefully, metabolize the toxin. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. For the next several hours, Dr. Evans worked tirelessly. He carefully monitored Rusty's vitals, adjusting the oxygen flow, managing the IV fluids. He administered medications to try and counteract the venom's effects on the nervous system and to support Rusty's failing organs. It was a delicate balancing act, like walking a tightrope with a hurricane raging. He explained to Lily in simple terms what he was doing. We're giving Rusty's body everything it needs to keep fighting, like giving a tiny warrior the best shield and sword we can. Find. Lily remained in her chair, a silent, watchful presence, her small hands still clasped, her gaze fixed on her beloved cat. She'd occasionally whisper words of encouragement to Rusty, her voice barely audible. You can do it, Rusty, you're strong. The clinic, usually quiet by this hour, was filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the hiss of oxygen. Dr. Evans ignored his own fatigue, the ache in his back, the rumbling in his stomach. The world outside faded away. There was only this small room, this tiny, fragile life, and the ghost of a star-shaped charm that had inexplicably linked his past to this desperate present. He felt a connection to this fight that went beyond his professional duty. It was as if by saving Rusty, he could somehow mend a small piece of his own fractured past. The resilience of animals, their quiet determination to live, often mirrored the strength people needed to find within themselves. What's the greatest lesson your pet has ever taught you about resilience? Share your thoughts in the comments. As dawn approached, casting a pale light through the clinic, Rusty was still alive. Barely, but alive. As the sun climbed higher, casting stronger rays into the clinic, Rusty's condition, while still critical, had stabilized slightly. His breathing was less ragged, and a faint touch of pink had returned to his gums. Dr. Evans, exhausted but unwilling to leave the cat's side, finally allowed himself a moment to truly look at the collar and charm again, the image of his wife and daughter vivid in his mind. He turned to Lily, who had dozed off fitfully in the chair, her small face smudged with dirt and dried tears. He gently touched her shoulder. Lily, dear, can you tell me where you found Rusty, or how long you've had him? Lily blinked sleepily, then her eyes focused on Rusty, and a small sigh of relief escaped her when she saw him still breathing. I found him about a year ago, I think. He was just a little kitten then, hiding under the old shed in our yard. He was all alone. She frowned, trying to remember. He already had the collar on. It was a bit big for him then, but he grew into it. The shed in your yard. Where is your home, Lily? Dr. Evans asked, his heart thumping. Lily described a small rundown house on the outskirts of town, in a neglected neighborhood near the old railway lines. A neighborhood he knew, a neighborhood he hadn't visited in decades, not since Eleanor had passed and his world had crumbled, not since Sarah, then a troubled teenager, had drifted further and further away, eventually leaving altogether, severing all ties. The pain of that estrangement was a wound that had never truly healed. This charm, Lily, he said, holding it out carefully. Do you know anything about it? Lily shook her head. No, sir, it was just always there on his collar. I thought maybe his first owner made it. Dr. Evans' mind reeled. The house Lily described, it was perilously close to the old community garden where Eleanor had volunteered, the place where she and Sarah had spent so many happy hours, the place where they had made that charm for Lucky, their terrier, who had, in a cruel twist of fate, been lost years ago, disappearing without a trace, taking a piece of their hearts with him. Could Rusty, this little ginger cat, somehow be connected to that long-lost past? How could a collar made for a dog have ended up on a stray kitten found years later? It seemed too improbable, yet the charm was undeniable. He needed to know more. The immediate crisis with Rusty was passing, but a new, urgent need arose within him. He had to understand this connection. Lily, he said, a plan forming in his mind, fueled by a desperate hope he hadn't felt in years. Once Rusty is a little stronger, would you mind if I came to see this shed where you found him? There's something I need to check. The puzzle pieces were scattered, jumbled, but he felt an overwhelming compulsion to try and fit them together. This was no longer just about saving a cat. It was about uncovering a piece of his own lost history. Over the next 2 days, Dr. Evans and Lily maintained their vigil. Lily, after being persuaded to go home for some rest and food by a kindly neighbor Dr. Evans had called, returned each morning, her small face lighting up with cautious hope as she saw Rusty. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Rusty began to improve. It was a recovery that defied the grim prognosis, a testament to the little cat's own will to live and Dr. Evans' relentless round-the-clock care. The first sign was a faint, tentative purr when Lily gently stroked his head. It was a sound so soft, Dr. Evans almost missed it, but it was there, a tiny rumble of life returning. Then Rusty opened both eyes, the cloudiness in them receding, replaced by a glimmer of his old spark. He even managed to weakly lap a little water, mixed with a nutrient supplement from a syringe Dr. Evans offered. Each small improvement was a monumental victory. Dr. Evans explained to Lily how Rusty's body was fighting back, how the supportive care was giving his system the chance to overcome the lingering effects of the venom. "He's a little fighter, this one," Dr. Evans said, a rare smile touching his own tired face, "just like his owner." Lily giggled, a bright, clear sound that felt like sunshine in the sterile clinic room. She would sit by Rusty's cage, talking to him in soft tones, telling him about her day, about the birds she'd seen, her unwavering belief in his recovery a palpable force. Dr. Evans found himself watching them, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the clinic's heating. The bond between them was so pure, so strong. It reminded him of the simple, profound joy animals could bring, a joy he had almost forgotten how to feel. By the 3rd day, Rusty was able to lift his head. He was still weak, still wobbly, but he was undeniably on the mend. He ate a small amount of soft food on his own, his appetite slowly returning. Dr. Evans removed the IV catheter, a significant milestone. The puncture wound on his side was healing cleanly, the infection gone. It was, by all accounts, a miraculous recovery, the kind of outcome that made all the sleepless nights, all the worry, all the emotional investment worthwhile. Dr. Evans felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He had faced down impossible odds and, with Lily's unwavering faith as a silent partner, they had won. Rusty, the little cat who had arrived at death's door, was going to live. If the story of Rusty's resilience also touched your heart, let us know in the comments below about a time your pet showed incredible strength. We love reading your experiences. A week after Rusty's near-fatal encounter, he was a different cat. Still a little thin, perhaps, but his ginger fur was regaining its sheen, his eyes were bright and alert, and he greeted Lily with enthusiastic if slightly wobbly headbutts against the bars of his recovery cage. The day finally came when Dr. Evans declared him well enough to go home. Lily was ecstatic, her smile wide enough to light up the entire clinic. As Dr. Evans gently placed Rusty into a carrier Lily had brought, a worn cardboard box lined with a clean, soft towel, he felt a pang. Not of sadness, but of something akin to it, a reluctance to let this new, fragile connection fade. "Now, Lily," Dr. Evans said, kneeling down to her level, "Rusty will need to take it easy for a while. No adventurous explorations under sheds for a bit, all right? And make sure he eats all his food." He handed her a small bag of high-quality kitten food, his treat. Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes shining. "I will, Dr. Evans, I promise. Thank you. Thank you for saving him." She threw her arms around his legs in a spontaneous, heartfelt hug that took him by surprise. He hesitated for a moment, then awkwardly patted her on the back, a warmth spreading through him that was entirely new. "You're very welcome, Lily," he said, his voice a little gruff. "You were a very brave girl, and Rusty is a very lucky cat to have you." As Lily prepared to leave, carefully carrying the box with Rusty inside, Dr. Evans remembered his earlier question. "Lily, about that shed. I'd still very much like to see it, if that's all right with your mum." Lily's mother, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes whom Dr. Evans had spoken to on the phone, had come to collect them. She overheard and smiled. "Of course, Doctor, we owe you so much. Lily's told me everything you've done." "You're welcome any time." A few days later, Dr. Evans found himself standing in Lily's small, overgrown backyard. The shed was dilapidated, leaning precariously. With Lily and her mother watching, he carefully peered into the dusty, cobweb-filled space beneath it. At first, he saw nothing but dirt and shadows. Then, tucked away in a far corner, almost invisible, was a small desiccated object. He reached in carefully and pulled it out. It was an old leather dog collar, much larger than Rusty's, stiff with age and dirt, and attached to it, almost obscured by grime, was another identical lopsided metal star charm. His breath hitched. It was Lucky's collar. Their lost dog all those years ago must have somehow ended up here, perhaps seeking shelter in his final days, and the collar, with Sarah's handmade charm, had remained a forgotten relic until a tiny stray kitten seeking its own shelter had perhaps snuggled against it, the smaller collar with its duplicate charm catching on, a bizarre, serendipitous transfer. Or perhaps Sarah herself, in a moment of grief or remembrance, had left the smaller collar there too, a tribute to her lost pet and a lost time. The exact how didn't matter as much as the undeniable connection. He looked at Lily, who was now playing with a much more energetic Rusty nearby. This little girl and her cat had unknowingly brought a piece of his past, a piece of his heart back to him. The solitude that had clung to him for so long felt lighter. A new bond had been forged, not just between a vet and a patient, but between souls touched by loss and redeemed by an unexpected connection. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that his life had changed irrevocably for the better. The quiet ache in his chest was still there, but now it was accompanied by a gentle, warming hope. Weeks turned into months. Dr. Evans found himself looking forward to Lily's regular visits with Rusty for checkups, which were always, of course, free of charge. The clinic no longer felt quite so silent, so empty. Lily's cheerful chatter and Rusty's contented purrs filled the space with a new kind of warmth. He learned about Lily's struggles at school, her dreams of becoming an artist, her simple joys. He found himself offering advice, sharing stories of his own, even laughing more than he had in years. He helped Lily's mother find some part-time work through a friend, a small gesture that made a big difference to their little family. The discovery of Lucky's collar and the impossible journey of its tiny twin had been a catalyst. It hadn't erased the pain of his past losses, but it had somehow opened a door, letting in a sliver of light. He even found himself looking at the old photograph on his mantelpiece, Eleanor, Sarah, and Lucky, not with the sharp pang of grief, but with a softer, more wistful remembrance, now tinged with a strange sense of continuity. He started volunteering at a local animal shelter on his days off, the quiet satisfaction of helping those without a voice filling a part of the void he hadn't realized was still so vast. One afternoon, Lily brought him a drawing. It was a picture of him in his white coat with a smiling Rusty at his feet and a lopsided golden star shining above them. "This is for you, Dr. Arthur," she said, her eyes bright, "because you're our lucky star." Dr. Evans felt a lump form in his throat. He carefully took the drawing, his hand brushing hers. In that moment, he understood that true wealth wasn't in a bustling practice or a pristine home, but in these connections, these small acts of kindness given and received. A little girl and her ginger cat had not only found a savior in him, but they had in turn saved him from a different kind of demise, a slow fade into lonely old age. He had found a new purpose, a new unconventional little family. The silence in his home was now often broken by phone calls from Lily, or by the memory of her laughter, and it no longer felt quite so empty. He had learned that sometimes the greatest miracles come in the smallest, furriest packages, and that a promise made against all odds can indeed change everything. How about sharing this video with a friend who also loves animals as much as we do? Let's spread this chain of kindness.